Modern, and today we are talking about the Orbea Wild. This is the, not a master shower, those notes are for something else. This is the H10 alloy build with a few upgrades, which we'll talk about. At the time this was shot, this bike is running $65.99. It has the 750 watt hour battery. First, sorry, we'll jump into some specs. So you can get this bike with either the 750 watt hour battery or optional 625 watt hour. And I know some people are like, well, who would spec this with less battery? I think it has something to do with the weight. So you can cut down significantly on what is a pretty heavy bike by saving some weight in the battery. And then if you wanted to, Bosch actually makes this little thing that fits in a bottle cage. It's a battery extender. So you could leave that in the car, drain your battery, throw that thing in. I never bought it. I've got the big battery and never needed more, which we'll also talk about. This one comes with the Performance suspension, not the Performance Elite. I did upgrade the fork to a Performance Elite fork. Orbea wheels in alloy. So these are the OC MC32 team, sorry. They're fine. They're like most aluminum wheels, you know, they're about as durable. I have bent the rear rim pretty bad. The first one is gone. I think it's in the garage. It won't hold air anymore. But that can be said for most alloy wheels that I run in the Front Range here in Colorado. So they're comfortable, they're reasonably durable, about as durable as any other alloy wheel. Spare for maybe the EX511, whatever that really strong one is from DT. Stock, this bike came with 2.6 Maxxis tires, which the DHF and a DHR combo, which honestly were really, really big and kind of cumbersome, which we'll talk about as well. They were really fun in the snow, but for everything else, it just kind of felt like too hard to get the bike to turn. It's got the base, I don't know what the base Shimano brakes are called exactly, but it's not the SLX, it's like one below SLX. Other than the bells and whistles that you get with SLX or XT with the tool-free adjust, they've been fine. They're just like the other Shimano brakes. So it's funny people spend money on XTR Shimano brakes when pretty much all Shimano brakes feel the same to me. And it came with an XT SLX drivetrain. I've upgraded some of those bits. It also came with an OC, kind of Orbea's house brand dropper post, which in the dropper world is one of the sloppier feeling dropper posts. It would get stuck all the time. There was a lot of play. I really didn't like it, so I upgraded it to this bike yoke here, which is like the opposite of all those terrible things I just described. But yeah, overall for $65.99 for an e-bike that you can ride pretty much without upgrading if you didn't want to, I'd say it's a decent value. There's probably, you know, I was also on the Commensal Meta SX Power Bosch. I thought that was a bit of a better value, had much better brakes, the TRP DHR Evos, had better suspension, it had the Ultimate, RockShox Ultimate setup, and it was a little bit less money. So apples to apples, I think the Commensal was offering more value. Other bikes in this category, it's kind of average when you get away from direct-to-consumer brands, but I don't know, for my first e-bike purchase, I wanted to not spend a ton of money in case I hated the sport, but turns out I love the sport, so I think I'll never not have an e-bike ever again. Jumping into the geometry, this is an extra large. I am 6'1", I should have bought a large. Orbea Wild buyers, if you are on the margin of a size, I would not size up, I would size down. Defer to your local bike shop on that, but for me, at 6'1", XL always felt a little long. I got along with it, I adjusted, but it took adjustment every ride. It wasn't like something I adjusted to and then the bike felt fine. I shortened the stem at one point, I slammed the seat a little bit forward, and just kind of 505 reach with the weight of this bike, it just always felt a little bit long. It's got a 1306 mil wheelbase, a 64 degree head angle, which I think is the sweet spot. Enduro, trail, all mountain, 64 is kind of where I want to be. 77.5 seat tube angle, which is pretty steep, and you feel that. It definitely gets you up towards the bars. 505 mil reach, again, kind of wish I had dropped down to the 480 mil reach, which is a little shorter, but I think with e-bikes it doesn't matter as much. You can get a slightly smaller bike and they're so heavy that you might want, you know, I was on a large Commensal Meta SX and that felt great because you could, you know, use the geometry adjustment there to make up for throwing around a bike that is, you know, 20, 30 pounds heavier than what you're normally riding. So not only is this bike large for people on the cusp of sizing, but e-bikes will feel large for people on the cusp of sizing, unless maybe it's one of these lightweight or middleweight e-bikes. 648 mil stack, which is a little shorter than I'm used to, but it keeps you like really nice and aggressive on the descents, and a 448 mil chainstay. And on that note, it's not a size specific chainstay. That chainstay is a constant throughout the size range. Climbing, you know how I feel about climbing with e-bikes. It's a rocket ship. I don't have a ton of complaints. I will compare it a little bit to the SX and the trail that I rode. It's actually, you know what, I'm going to compare it to the Rayon, because I've been on the Rayon, which is right there. I'm going to review that next. The Rayon feels like very high in its travel and very firm, and it's not an e-bike. I know some people are like, well, why are you comparing this? Because I was told that this took a lot from the Rayon, and I think that whoever said that was wrong. I think Orbea built a completely different bike, and I mean, obviously, all of these pivot points are at a different spot. The shock mounting is completely different than the Rayon, but I was told, like, hey, they pulled a lot of elements from that. And maybe geometry-wise, they're all these bikes are falling in the same arena, I think, with a few exceptions, but this couldn't be more different than the Rayon. It's got gobs of traction. It's a very active rear end. It's not overly active like some bikes. It doesn't sit super deep in its travel, but it sits comfortably in maybe that mid-range with lots of traction. The Rayon sits really high up in its travel without any climb switch on, and if you are climbing up technical stuff, you can tend to get bounced around a little bit, whereas this one is just kind of smooth, efficient. You stay seated, and it does the job. So, you know, e-bike, so it's a bat out of hell, but also you get tons of traction. It feels long. Again, I'll kind of go back to that. For an XL, I always felt like that front wheel was going to get away from me once the power kicks in. Having a slightly longer reach just makes you feel a little bit less in control. This review would sound a lot different, I think, if I had gotten a large, but my experience with the XL, a bike that I do fall in the size range for, it felt a little bit long. And then notes on the Bosch Performance CX, the power is really easy to modulate, which is nice because you would get up to sections, drop into an easier gear, and just kind of like, it's very intuitive to know when this motor is going to kick in and how powerful it is going to be. So for slow speed tech uphill thing, you know, little sections, the Bosch Performance CX performed beautifully. I was really impressed by it, same as I was on other bikes. Just super easy to modulate that power, really happy there. Yeah, that's about it on climbing. Descending, stable, fast, but also still very accessible. I think that the reason this bike has won so many awards is because it appeals to so many different kinds of riders. It is playful and jumpy. Even though this one was a little bit too big for me, it still felt very playful and very predictable, launching off of jumps and into the air. Is extremely fast, extremely smooth over rough terrain, which, again, compared to the Rayon, Orbea, I hope you're listening, make this bike. Get rid of the Rayon, or just bring this whole formula over to a new enduro bike. Call it whatever you want. Call it the Wild Analog. I don't care. But I think a lot of riders who have been on both will probably agree that this is just a more well-rounded platform than the Rayon, where the Rayon is like an enduro bike that rides like a huge trail bike. This rides like an enduro bike in all of the best ways. You know, it sucks up the bumps like 8 out of 10. It's not super gooey, which is good. You want some mid-stroke and kind of bottom-end support, but it takes most things blindly at speed like a complete champion. So it was a little bit hard to get through turns with those big 2.6 tires at first, so I dropped them down to the 2.4 Cryptidol front and rear, and that made a bit of difference. It was kind of like, just like if you're over here and then you're going this way, it was just kind of like it was like steering a spaceship. Because A, it is super long, and then B, you've got these massive tire profiles to overcome. So switching to a smaller tire helped with a lot of that, although I was still just on a bike that was too big for me. And yeah, I don't know, I think it's an extremely fast bike, but also playful. And I think that's gonna lead me into what I wanna talk about next, is just kind of not who it's for. We're gonna do comparisons real quick. Compared to the Meta SX, I rode both of these bikes back to back a ton last winter before I had to give the SX back after testing, and rode this one for the remainder of the time. And there were definitely days I missed the SX, and I thought that was a kind of surprising because, again, this has gotten like all of the awards, best, enduro style bike 2023, 2024, all that stuff. And I thought that the SX was a bit more versatile in a lot of situations. If I was only going for, King of Mountain all the time, this is the bike I'd take out. If I was just going out to ride for fun and I wanted to explore new terrain and get into like tighter, more technical moves, I think the Commensal Meta SX was a better option for that. But they're kind of neck and neck because there were times where I was like, I want to just open up and see how fast this bike can go down this really gnarly chute. And this was way more predictable in those situations. So it kind of depends on like what type of rider you are. I'm like Jekyll and Hyde. Some days fast is fun for me, and some days jumping around and jibbing about is the most fun. And it's never the same. It depends on the bike that I'm on. It depends on the mood that I'm in. But this bike slightly favors that kind of like plow, speed, just kind of like crazy fast rider style. But don't rule it out for anybody else either, because it is still fairly playful for a really large bike, really heavy bike, and is just really well rounded. So with that, we will kind of lead into who is this bike for. And I think my first note here is everyone who loves mountain biking. So that's pretty much it. I think it's going to appeal to a lot of riders. Like I said, though, with a slight favor to those people who, when I say if fun is fast, if fast is fun, if that defines you as a rider, you're going to love this. If you're a well-rounded rider and you kind of feel like me, where some days like jumping is fun, some days jibbing around is fun, but some days going as fast as you possibly can on land is fun, this will still also really appeal to you. If you're somebody who absolutely hates internal cable routing and proprietary parts, you're not going to like this bike. It's not for you. The cables go through the headset. There's all kinds of Orbea stuff happening here, but mainly that. The headset spacers are funky also. That kind of stuff just like throws my shop off, and my shop sells Orbea. But like, I know if I wanted to go get my brakes changed, they'd be like, yeah, that's going to be 2 months. They would just hate to deal with it. And I don't know, I kind of like hate rolling my bike into a shop and thinking, oh, they probably don't want to work on this. And I think a lot of mechanics will feel that way when you show up with an Orbea with overly complicated cable routing. So it's not for the person who likes to kind of DIY, work on stuff. I've got the raw jib in the garage right now, and that is external cable routing, super simple to work on. And that's kind of the other end of the spectrum for bike owners. It's like, I want to be able to work on everything myself and do it all without taking it to a shop that's going to get annoyed. Again, I think acutely, it really favors people who want to go out and get a King of Mountain or Queen of Mountain or whatever of Mountain. I think those people are best served, but I cannot emphasize enough that this is just a large e-bike for anybody who wants to have fun on the mountain, and I can totally see why it's won all of the awards that it's won. I know I talk a little bit much about how great the SX compared to this, but this is still I think that they're both exceptionally well-designed bikes and do what they set out to do perfectly, and that's bring smiles. So let me know if you have any questions. Stoked to be on e-bikes. So talk to you soon.